is the price of money? Hi guys, Praxgirl here. In our last lesson, we learned why the fears of monopoly and monopoly prices are unfounded. We found that the only coherent definition of monopoly comes from the word's historical roots of privileges granted by kings or the state. Therefore, we concluded that the modern fear of monopoly most likely originated from the negative effects of these past privileges. In this lesson, we will focus once again on money and connect it with our investigations on the determination of prices within the market. As we have learned, in a market, most goods are traded against one common medium of exchange, the good called money. Therefore, market prices are expressed as money prices. Having one good to trade against all other goods enables individuals participating in the market to determine their position relative to their goals with a level of precision not available in barter. We called this ability economic calculation. Once we understood the importance of economic calculation, we turned our focus to understanding the determination of prices of the goods that trade against money. We found that a uniform market price tends to arise for homogeneous goods, and that this occurs because whenever there is a discrepancy in prices, there is an opportunity for entrepreneurs to profit. Since we now understand how the market prices of the goods that trade against money are determined, we can turn our focus to the other side of trades on the market by asking this question. If the price of goods sold on the market are expressed in terms of money, what then is the price of money itself? The peculiarity of determining the price of money is precisely that it has no unit of expression. Money cannot be expressed in terms of money. Money is the most marketable good and practically on one side of every exchange in a market. Therefore, rather than referring to its price, we refer to its power to purchase the array of available goods on the market. Money's purchasing power will be determined in the same way as every other good we have been discussing in our catalactic investigations, by its supply and demand. People will sell and buy money because they perceive value in the money from the goods it can acquire for them in the near and remote future. To further understand how money's purchasing power is determined, let's reflect on how individuals in a market derive utility from money. In our lesson on marginal utility, we learned that acting individuals always make choices on the margin. That means that all actions consist of an individual choosing between the highest desire on their scale of values and then the next highest valued end. Here's how marginal utility applies in a monetary exchange. In an act of purchasing with money, the utility a person derives or expects to derive is determined by the marginal utility of adding a good purchased to his stock. Therefore, an individual's cost in exchanging money is the highest utility that he could have derived from the units of money that he gives up in the exchange. For example, if we suppose that James sells his labor to acquire 3 ounces of gold, then the marginal utility of this gold is what he expects to buy with it. For instance, if James is able to buy a hot dog with 3 ounces of gold, then the marginal utility of this gold is the psychic satisfaction he gets by consuming the hot dog. Now that we see that money is simply another good whose utility is determined on the margin, we can reflect on how money adheres to the law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility was a fundamental principle that helped us understand how humans arrange their scale of values. We found that each successive unit of a homogeneous good satisfies a less urgent desire and therefore must diminish in its value to a person. A popular argument says that this law cannot be applied to money because each successive unit will actually render more value to an actor. The claim states that if Eddie wants to buy a computer whose price is 10 ounces of gold, each successive unit leading up to his accumulating 10 ounces will be more valuable. However, the key to refuting this fallacy lies simply in the fact that the law of diminishing marginal utility applies to supplies of homogeneous goods. What makes a good homogeneous? For a good to be homogeneous, an actor must derive equal serviceability from the units in the supply. Therefore, 1 unit of money in our example is 10 ounces of gold rather than 1. If units of money consist in the ratios against the other goods for which they are bought and sold, why do people hoard money for an indeterminate amount of time? People refer to a supposed difference between what they call circulating money and idle money. This fallacious notion is yet another consequence of their attempts to study elements of human action through the method of natural sciences. Their mistakes begin with the assumption that if money's purpose is for exchange, then there exists a perfect rate of circulation akin to that of a river flowing.
Circulating in the economy, and there are injections into this economy, and there are leakages from the economy.
To begin with, money is always in the possession of an individual and is never magically circulating. What this means is that, for example, if a gold coin is in the possession of Andrew and he trades it in for an egg from Paul, and then quickly exchanges that gold coin for a stick of gum, the possession of that coin can be traced at each step. Even when a coin is passed between different individuals in fast succession, it is always owned by someone and comprises a part of their cash balance. Therefore, if money is always in the possession of an individual, then we know that it must also always be in service to that individual. One of the most common reasons for holding a cash balance is simply because there is a waiting period for a good an individual intends to eventually trade for. For example, if Jimmy intends to buy a diamond ring in the next town over for his fiancée, he may hold a cash balance while he travels. But even in situations in which a cash balance is held with no intention for trading for any particular good, that money is still in service and never idle. The key to understanding this point is found in money's function. Since money facilitates exchange, then the purpose of hoarding money indefinitely is a way of an actor investing and lowering his uncertainty. If Jimmy creates a savings account for a rainy day, he is foregoing his ability to satisfy other desires for satisfying the desire of safety, which is a valuable service. He does this because he believes that the purchasing power of money will remain the same. Jimmy can also postpone acquiring goods in the present if he anticipates that the purchasing power of money will go up in the future. If Jimmy sees that the purchasing power of money is dropping, he has an incentive to trade his stored money for real goods and services. And how will Jimmy determine the value of money to him? He will have to compare the prices of goods he desires on the market. We have now seen that money is always in service to whomever possesses it, and we understand how the marginal utility of money units are determined in exchange. But there is one final factor needed to explain how money's purchasing power comes into existence. Since the marginal utility of units of money are determined by the marginal utility of other products that those units could have purchased, does this not rely on the existence of money prices to begin with? If the purchasing power of money today is largely determined by the purchasing power of money yesterday, isn't that then a circular argument? In a simple barter economy, all goods are valued by the individuals on the spot, and their marginal utility is established by what each trader expects to derive from the exchange. But in a money economy, a buyer or seller of money must determine the value he expects from money by considering what money will be able to buy for him in the future. For this, an individual's only recourse is to reflect on the money prices of the past. Buyers and sellers will consider yesterday's money prices, that is, the purchasing power of money, and on that fact they will buy or sell or refrain from buying or selling. This process establishes new money prices today, which will factor into their future decisions on what to do with the money. But herein enters the problem we posed before. If today's purchasing power of money is based on yesterday's, what established yesterday's purchasing power? The answer is the day before yesterday's purchasing power. But this answer fails to address the core of the problem, as it merely pushes it back. While it is true that today's purchasing power of money depends on yesterday's money prices and yesterday's purchasing power depends on the day before's, this does not place us in an infinite regression situation. Because if we continue following this back in time, we must ultimately arrive at the day before which the money economy was a barter economy. At that very moment, we know that it must have been a consumer good which began to be valued as money, and this explains how money arrived its value on that day. The purchasing power of the good used as money is therefore determined by two partial demands: its demand for consumer and commercial purposes, and its demand as money. In an advanced economy, the demand for this good as money tends to overshadow its value for non-monetary uses. But nevertheless, both demands will account for the determination of its purchasing power. Let's use gold as an example. Gold has been traditionally the free market money. We can say that gold's purchasing power relative to all other goods being sold on the market, the gold price of all other goods, is determined by gold's use for industrial purposes and its demand as money. Because gold's demand for use as money overshadow its industrial uses, we can see that yesterday's purchasing power of gold will play the larger role in the demand for it today. Inversely, if we regress in time, we can see that this time component becomes weaker and weaker until we enter into the point at which gold's purchasing power had no time component. On the last day of barter, all good prices had no time component because gold was valued for direct use. On the first day at which gold became used as a medium of exchange, its purchasing power was based on the entire array of the gold prices on the last day of barter. And from then on, the purchasing power of gold would always contain a time component. This time component is the distinguishing characteristic between a money economy and that of primitive barter. And as we will continue to see in future lessons, the time component is an extremely useful effect of money. For now, it's important to realize that the money regression theorem is a purely logical deduction of what must happen whenever certain conditions of voluntary interpersonal exchange occur. It's a unique conclusion that's only been explained by praxeology and has not yet entered into mainstream discussion about money. But as we will see, the money regression theorem solves a most important riddle as to how and why money works. It especially helps us to understand why a money with no more value, and thus no demand, for industrial purposes can still continue to have a demand as a medium of exchange. The money regression theorem also makes it explicitly clear why money could not have been created out of thin air, or through a government edict, or through a social compact.
That's as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs.
We know that money must have had a prior demand in direct exchange, and therefore it's we, the praxeologists, who fully understand the weight of money in advanced economies. It's the praxeologists who, through the money regression theorem, understand that money is not an illusion and realize the dangers of trying to manipulate this backbone of the market economy. I'll see you guys in the next lesson.